Hi, this is Kat with Beadaholique, and in this video I'm going to show you how to bead weave the gray balance bracelet featuring the Czech glass Chevron 2-hole beads. Now you can see in my example here we're going to be doing this exact design in this exact colorway, but what I've done is I've taken those Chevron beads and you can see that they're 2-holed and they're drilled down the center there. And I've combined them with some 2-hole Cabochon beads there just for a little extra pop. And then I made a nice little geometric design in the center there with those chevron beads. This is a really great beginner project. So let's go ahead and talk about what you're going to need. So I have here the chevron beads. Now I just want to point out that this is actually 2 strands of the chevron beads, and the reason I wanted to do that for this particular color was because you can see in the example there I alternated the gold and the silver kind of colors there because I wanted to create a nice little geometric effect. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I had 2 strands so I didn't run out of one or the other color. You don't need as many beads as that, but it's always good to have some extras. That way you can alternate this and make it to your exact length. So we're going to be using those 2-hole chevron beads. And then over here I have some of those 2-hole Cabochon beads, and you can see that they have little holes there at the end, and they have a little dome on one side. So that is what makes them a little Cabochon, but they are also 2-holed, so that's going to help me with my design here. And then we have the Demi round Toho seed beads, and these are 11-0, and I picked this really pretty green color. I thought it just really makes the whole thing look a little industrial, so I went with that. So these are the 11-0 Toho Demi rounds. And then I just have my magnetic clasp over here. So the only tool that you're going to need is probably a pair of snips because we're going to need to cut that thread off. And then I have already strung onto my 2 needles, so we're going to be using a 2-needle method for this. I have about 6 feet or so, which is definitely overkill, but I just wanted to make sure that I had enough thread of the FireLine, and this is the smoke, and this is the 4-pound, because we're going to be doing a couple of extra passes through some of these beads, so I definitely wanted to use the 4-pound. All right, so I have my thread all strung up and ready to go. Now I'm just going to move my snips out of the way. I don't want to get my thread caught on there. So the first thing we're going to do, and this is a great beginner design because we're going to work very linear. So I'm going to go ahead and take my magnetic clasp, string it onto one of my needles, and I want it to sit right down in the very center, just like so. All right, and then to each needle here, let me just kind of get this centered on my table so you can see what's happening. All right, so to each needle, I'm going to add 3 of my little demi rounds. And 1, 2, 3. All right, go ahead and slide that down. All right, so now we're ready to pick up our first chevron bead. And the way I want to do this first one is I want to pick it up so that it is facing sort of towards the center of our bracelet. So if you can kind of look at the bracelet here, this is what we're kind of creating. So you can just see how easy and how linear this is going to be. So I'm going to take one needle and put it through one side. Oops. All right, we got attached there, so I'm going to have to move him out of the way a little bit. There we go. And my other needle through the other side. Now for this part, we're not going to be doing any crisscrossing, so you want to make sure to kind of keep those needles separate. All right, so we have our little clasp, our 3 seed beads on each side, and our chevron that's sort of facing down. All right, so now we're going to add 5 of our demi rounds to each needle. 3, 4, 5, slide that down. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Double checking. Slide that down. All right. There we go. Okay. So now we're ready to start. So I'm going to be starting, and here's where I like to lay out my design just so I can kind of see it. So I'm going to do a gold and then alternate to the silver, and I'm going to repeat that. Now, what let me say this as I'm sort of setting this up. What I'm making here is about a 6 3/4, 7-inch bracelet. If you need to alternate that or alter that, I should say, go ahead and adjust these little side portions here. You can use less beads or more beads if that is what you are going for there. and let me just double check on my piece here. So there we go. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I need one more of my silver beads there. All right. So again, just kind of setting that aside. I'm just sort of following my example there. Now you can alter this as you want. Like I said, you don't have to alternate the colors. You can keep them all the same. So it's really nice and basic. All right, so we got to add our chevron first. I almost added a demi round, but we're going to add our chevron, and I'm going to slide it down. And that's just going to come to a nice little point right there. And then adding a demi round to each and going through my next chevron bead. So you just continue to do this all the way up. And I'm going to kind of set mine out of the camera just so I can make this a little faster for myself. But it's very simple, and this is why this is a great kind of bead weaving beginner project, especially if you haven't used 2-hole beads before. This is a great little project to kind of get you started. Now this design does work with a lot of other 2-hole beads. You can also do this where maybe you need to add some different size seed beads. You can use some 11-ohs or even some 8-ohs in there if the beads will accommodate that. But I like these demi rounds. I think it just really is just enough of a buffer to let that 2-hole bead shine through and really do its own thing. All right, so I'm just working my way down, sliding my beads down, almost to the top here. And again, I'm just watching my pattern, making sure I'm picking up the right color. There we go. And again, just making sure that you're not crisscrossing your needles at any point. So I'm trying to keep them in each hand, and you can kind of see that I'm just making sure to keep them separated in my finger. There we go, just sliding it down. And don't worry too much about your tension. That'll kind of tighten up as we get to our center section there. Let me just get there. There we go. Oh, come on. See? Flip. All right, so I just have 2 more to go. And then we're going to start with that center section, and that's where we're going to start doing that crisscross. All right. All right, so last one there. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to continue, and we're going to pick up one of the demi rounds onto each needle. And then I'm going to take one of my 2-hole cabochon beads, and I'm going to string up through the center. Now when you're looking at these, and here, this is probably an easier one to see. When you're looking at these, you'll notice that there's 2 holes that are close together on one side, and then there's 2 holes that are kind of far apart there. We want to go through the side that has the 2 closest together there. So taking that right needle and going up through that one side there, and I'm going to do with the left needle, doing this in a separate thing so you guys can see. All right. So now you can see that those cords are nice and close, and your bead should sit nice down into that little notch right there. So here's where we can give it a little tug. We want this to be nice and secure. All right. So next, we're going to pick up one of our demi rounds on each of our needles. Come on. And I want to pick up one of the gold chevron beads, but I want to go through facing the opposite direction. So we're creating a nice little sort of parentheses or a nice little frame to our little cabochon bead. All right, so sliding that down. All right, so still keeping our threads separated there. We have not crossed them over yet. All right, so now I'm going to work with my right needle for just a moment. I'm going to pick up one of the demi rounds, and then what I want to do is I want to pick up one of the chevron beads, but I want to make sure that I'm going through this first hole right here on this side and coming out. And next I want to pick up another demi round, and I'm going to pick up another chevron bead, and what I want to do is I want to go through that first hole there, and I'm going to kind of show you, just like that first hole to the right on that cabochon bead, and string that down. All right, so I'm just going to repeat with the other side. So we picked up a demi round, and then for my chevron, I want to go through that hole right there, string that down, pick up another demi round, and then again with that cabochon, now I want to go to what is going to look like our left side. So I want to go through this hole here. All right. Try to get my hands out of the way there so you can see what we've got going on now. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this thread around, and I'm going to go through the second hole of the cabochon bead. And before I pull too tight, I'm going to pick up one of the demi rounds, and I'm going to go through that second hole in my chevron bead here. I'll just get this, and then I'll move my hand out of the way. There we go. So I'm picking up that demi round and going through that second hole of the chevron on the right hand side. Now we can pull that down and together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up one demi round. I'm going to go through the second hole of that other chevron on the other side. So this is where we're crisscrossing over and pulling that together. One more demi round and going through the second hole of that cabochon bead. There we go. Sometimes you'll have a little something stuck inside your beads. You can usually just poke right through it. Okay, so now I've crisscrossed over that whole first section there. So now I'm going to move my needle over there. So this is now my left-hand needle that I started with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to loop around, coming out of this hole, loop around through this hole, and I'm going to just retrace that thread path all the way through to get myself to the other side. Now make sure you're catching all the beads there. It's okay if you need to do this in a couple steps. You just don't want to miss any of those demi round beads. They're kind of easy to not pick up. Okay, so I'm coming through, going through this side, and through my next cabochon bead. All right, now here's an opportunity to really kind of just tighten up your work. Just make sure that everything is looking good. There we go. Want to make sure everything is straight as well. Okay, so now we're ready to kind of add on that second unit that's going to live right there. So what we're going to need to do first is we're going to need to be adding on some of those cabochon beads. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of, let me see if I can show you easily on here. So what's going to happen is we're going to come out and we're going to attach to the next one, and we're going to do that crisscross and go all the way back down through, just as we did before. So now, coming out, we're going through that first hole there, through that cabochon bead. And that's going to end up sitting right there for us. We're going to pick up one of our demi rounds, and then we're going to go through one hole of our chevron bead. Just like so. There we go. And then pick up one more demi round and go through the opposite on our next chevron bead. So this is, we're just doing that same center crisscross right now. All right, one more demi. And now we're going to take one more cabochon bead, and I want to make sure that I'm going through that secondary hole there that's on the right hand side. So coming out there. And now what's going to happen is I'm just going to leave this cord here, and I'm going to pick up my other cord, the one that is coming out of that bottom, and we're just going to loop all the way back through and just crisscross through all the beads I just added. So going through that chevron, or excuse me, through the cabochon, through the demi round, through the chevron, through the demi round, And actually I can do that all in one step, which is very nice. There we go. All right, and pulling that around, and again, we should be crisscrossed and everything should come together really nicely. Beautiful. All right, so now we are going to go back one more time, and you can see on the side here that you'll have 4 different holes here. So now we're coming out of this one here, so all we're gonna do is just turn our thread around, same as we did before, and go through. And again, making sure at this stage that everything is nice and tight. There we go. And we're gonna pick up 1 demi round, and we're gonna go through that chevron bead. Pick up 1 more demi round, and now we're gonna go through 1 hole of our chevron bead there. Pick up 1 more demi round, and we're gonna go through 1 hole of our cabochon bead. All right, so that's to get to one side. And here we go, we're gonna do the same on the other side, coming out of that cabochon, turning it around right here. Adding on 1 demi round. Want to make sure we have our nice little spacers in there. Going through. Picking up 1 more demi round. Going through our chevron there at the top. Just making sure everything is nice and tight and flipped properly. Picking up 1 more demi round and going through my cabochon bead. All right, so at this point, we've done our major focal piece, and now we're just going to kind of continue to do what we did on the other side. So you'll just be repeating here. So I'll show you one more time. So we're picking up our little demi rounds, and now don't forget, we want to use a gray bead going down the opposite direction to create that nice little parentheses around our cabochons. All right, so from here, we're just going to alternate with our gold and silver all the way until we get to the other side, and then I'm going to show you how to do the final crisscross and bring it back together and finish it off. All right, so we are here at the very end here, so I've strung all my beads, so now I'm just picking up those 5 demi rounds as I did before and going through that chevron bead, and we're going to do that on both sides. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now this is also a little easy way to lengthen the bracelet if you need to do that. If you just maybe want to add just a little bit extra length, you can maybe add 7 or 8 of the demi rounds, or you can also add 2 in between each one, so that can give you an opportunity to do that as well. So just as we're talking about sizing there. All right, so 3 on one, 3 on another. There we go, slide those down. And now I'm going to take 1 needle and I'm going to string on my little clasp here. And I'm going to come through and I'm going to crisscross and I'm going to go through the other seed beads, the other demi rounds there, and all the way down through the last 5 that I just strung and through 1 more chevron bead. So I'm just kind of making a nice little loop there so I can pull that nice and tight. All right, and you guessed it, we're going to do the same with the other side. We're going to go through, making sure we catch that loop of our clasp, catching all of those demi rounds, pulling that down through, and I do want to go through that chevron bead as well. All right, so here's your last opportunity to kind of just give a nice little tug and tighten anything up that may have gotten loose while we were doing that. And now what I want to do is I'm just going to take my needle, I'm going to come behind the whole thread bridge there, come up through, and see that little loop right there? I'm just going to catch it with my needle and tie a little tiny knot. And then I'm just going to go through a couple of beads here Now if you wanted, you can run all the way through. You have enough thread if you want to reinforce the entire bracelet. You don't have to, but I like to do at least 2 little knots here, just 1 on each side. Or sorry, excuse me, 2 on each side there. All right, so then just to show you one more time, so we're just going to go behind our little thread bridge there. Make sure you're not creating thread bridges across the beads, so just make sure that it's sitting right into that nice little well there, because we want our threads to disappear. And go through. And I went through the Demi round that time, but that's all right. We'll just go right down through, up through my little loop there, and tie my little knot. All right, so now we just need to take our snips, come in and get as close as we can to those knots, and we are all finished. So there you have it. It's a nice, easy, fun little bracelet. You can choose your favorite colors of the Demi rounds, the Cabochon beads, and our 2-hole chevron beads, and just have a lot of fun making these bracelets. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can get all of these supplies and see even more videos by heading over to Beadaholique.com.